Week 17, Dolphins fans, how are we doing today? It's Ben Morgan of the Fins Up Network. Just 2 regular season games. That's all that's left. That's all that's guaranteed for us as Dolphins fans. Obviously, we can hold out some hope, pray, hope, anything that you can do to try to get us into the postseason. But as we've discussed, we need a lot of help. But it starts with us. We got to win these next 2, so we'll see how it goes. Starting week 17 with the Cleveland Browns. Now, we're going to dive into this week's first preview video here in just a second. Before we do, though, I got to hear from you. If you've got any questions that you would like included in this week's final preview and prediction video, you know what to do. Go ahead and drop them in the comments. We'll get as many added as we possibly can. Couple of real quick updates, though, before we dive into some of this Dolphins and Browns talk. As you may know by now, linebacker Bradley Chubb's window to be activated to the official roster has officially closed earlier this week, which means no, we will not be seeing him on the field for the Miami Dolphins in 2024. Now, one thing to keep in mind regarding Bradley Chubb, the financial side of things, as always, follow the money. If we would have brought him back and he would have went on and, God forbid, suffered another significant injury, I was told that we would have been on the hook for his full salary in 2025. Go ahead and look that up. It is a significant number. I doubt we're going to bring him back on that number. We've talked about this before. Look for us to probably end up letting him walk, test some free agency, and then from there, if we can bring him back on a cheaper deal, kind of like Emmanuel Ogbah, that would be the ideal plan for Bradley Chubb. So there's obviously, like we said, though, some financial implications that go into this decision. So I know we're all sad we didn't get to see Bradley Chubb this year, but keep that in mind because that is a huge factor. And then lastly, the team did officially release Shaq Barrett, which may allow him to join another team here this year. And now why I say may join is because if he is claimed off of waivers, that team will own his rights, but he cannot come back and play yet this year. If he goes unclaimed and then he signs with the team, he can go ahead and play this year. So it's some of those NFL technicalities that are surrounding this one. But regardless, he is no longer a member of the Miami Dolphins or under any of our control. Knowing what we know now, man, it would have been nice to just keep Andrew, Van, and Ginkle. I'm not going to talk too much more about that. It's going to open up a whole new can of worms. With that, though, Dolphins fans, let's dive into some of this talk. We'll dive into the injury report in the next video, as we get a clearer picture of everything. But as we dive into the Browns offense, who the Browns roll out at quarterback goes a long ways as to really how we should discuss and preview this game from the perspective of the Browns offensively. If it's Dorian Thompson-Robinson, I'm going to call him DTR mostly likely through the rest of this video. So if you hear that, that's who I'm referring to. If we see him, I think we see the Cleveland Browns really try to lean into the running game this week. Now, he is dealing with a calf injury. However, right before recording this, it sounds like he's going to be good to go. Still not like a full-out answer from this. But if it's not DTR, their options would be Jameis Winston, if once again he's healthy enough as well, or Bailey Zappi, who served as quarterback 2 for the Browns in their game last week. If it were to turn out to be Winston, it's a whole different game plan compared to these other two. As you know, as from being an NFL fan, you've seen Jameis Winston. That dude loves to toss the ball around a little bit. Now, that has turned out both good and bad for the Browns. Jameis Winston has thrown 13 touchdowns, which is 8 more than Deshaun Watson, DTR, Bailey Zappi, who hasn't played yet and everything. But all those guys combined, yeah, it's 8 more than all of those guys. But we said there's good and bad, right? He's thrown 12 interceptions. So just 1 less interception than touchdown. But that's been the story with Jameis Winston. He's a gunslinger. He's one of the members of the 30-30 club, 30 touchdowns, 30 interceptions. What a wild ride he puts your team on if you're a fan of the Cleveland Browns. But the biggest beneficiary of when it was Jameis and they're slinging it around, that was Jerry Jeudy, who is going to be one of the primary focuses for Anthony Weaver and this Dolphins defense, regardless of who they have in at quarterback. But Jerry Jeudy, I watched a lot of Tua when he was in college. I fell in love with Jerry Jeudy. He is an interesting case study because he can just pop off. He can pop off for a crazy game once in a while, but then he can do what he did last week for the Browns. 2 catches, 20 yards. All in all, I'm not super concerned about Jerry Jeudy, about the Browns pass catchers in general. And that's a lot of that is due to the uncertainty at quarterback, especially if it's DTR. But Jerry Jeudy's probably that primary guy on the outside that's got to be accounted for. And you only have to go back, 4 weeks? Look what he did to Denver Broncos, his former team, on primetime. 9 catches, 235 yards, and a touchdown. It could have been more, but if you remember that game, Jameis Winston missed him deep early in that game. But outside of Jerry Jeudy, the pass catcher that scares me the most, due in large part to just how bad we struggle against the position of tight end, is David Njoku. Now, Njoku did miss Thursday's practice with the knee injury. He actually left last week's game against the Bengals with that injury. So keep that one on your radar later this week as well, because we've seen the tight ends. You know it. Brock Bowers, Kittle, Tucker Kraft, all these tight ends that just continue to just own this Dolphins defense, continue to give us fits. So keep your eye on that. But if the Browns do turn to a heavy run game on Sunday, expect a heavy dose of Jerome Ford. The Browns placed Nick Chubb on IR a few weeks back, so now they're back to Jerome Ford as their primary running back. Now, I was a big Jerome Ford fan as he was getting ready to enter the league, kind of the draft process. He's turned out to be a pretty good one, a pretty solid running back for the Cleveland Browns. Obviously, he got the bulk of the work last year. Once Nick Chubb ended up having his season-ending injury, took on the bulk of the carries then, and now he's averaging 5.5 yards per carry this season as well. So he was actually a little bit more effective and efficient than Chubb was doing this year as well. Now, the obvious way to really nullify Ford and the Browns run game is you jump out to an early lead, make the Browns become one-dimensional. That's in a roundabout way kind of what happened to the Browns last week. Jerome Ford ripped off a 66-yard run super early in that game, ended up getting just 10 more carries. 10 carries for 26 yards the rest of the way. They ended up being down 17 points at halftime. Regardless, I think Ford is probably your number one guy to stop from a Cleveland Browns offensive perspective, but you also got to be mindful of DTR, what he can do on the ground as well if he goes. Like I said, he's dealing with a calf injury. Last week against the Bengals, he goes for 49 yards on 9 carries. And I don't have to say this, but along with struggling with opposing teams' tight ends, we always seem to struggle with mobile quarterbacks as well. So my biggest key defensively is being mindful of both Jerome Ford and DTR when they are getting their work done on the ground. But most importantly, try to get out to an early lead. Can we try that once this year? Get out to an early lead and make a team become a little bit one-dimensional. All right, let's transition to when we have the ball. Dolphins fans, will the run game for us be present 2 weeks in a row? Will hopefully we see Isaiah Wynn at right guard even more often than the split snaps that he had last week with Liam Eichenberg? Those are my biggest questions heading into this one. The Browns are allowing 19th most rushing yards per game this season. So we got Achane coming off one of his better all-around performances last week against the 49ers. And then it's basically been Raheem Mostert as the only other running back that's really getting significant snaps. Achane logged 50 last week. Mostert was at 21. Jeff Wilson got 7. We got a big fat 0 from Jalen Wright. So all signs are pointing towards Achane continuing to get another big workload, and then it's likely going to be Raheem Mostert as your primary spell at the position. Last week against the Browns, I'm going back to what the Bengals did against the Browns here. Chase Brown went for 91 yards on 18 carries. As a team, they averaged 5.3 yards per carry on the ground. So there have been opportunities as well. I went back through the schedule. There's opportunities for run game against this Browns defense. But in my opinion, it's going to come down to those front 5 up front for the Miami Dolphins offensive line, which we're going to get into more into the next video, see if we can learn more about the snaps between Liam Eichenberg and Isaiah Wynn, how the tackle positions are going to end up kind of getting cleared up here as we get later into the week with the injury report as well. As for the pass game, Another guy to monitor, Jalen Waddle. I believe he got in a limited practice session on Thursday. He at least was on the field on Thursday. But man, I speak for all of us, I would hope, to say, let's see Tyreek Hill put a complete game together. I'm talking no drops. I'm talking no miscommunications with Tua, no routes ran incorrectly. He needs to put a solid week together after these last 2 weeks where I'll say that maybe like the noise around him and the idea of maybe trying to trade him this offseason. Not sure how realistic all that is, but it's the noise has been leveled up. Let's put it that way. It's gotten a little bit louder around him. So let's see a complete game from who's supposed to be our number one go-to playmaker on the offensive side of the ball. Outside of Tyreek and Waddle, I want to see Malik Washington continue to make plays when his number is called. He caught 3 of 4 targets for 28 yards last week. But that's a guy where if you are looking ahead already to next year, how does he figure into that competition for that wide receiver 3 spot? And how do we end up treating this offseason in regards to the wide receiver position? So let's look for him to continue to stack some positive weeks together here as we look to end of the season. One more thing I want to talk about. I'm going to jump this off your screen here real quick. But obviously, I saved maybe the best for last. I want to see Jonnu Smith continue his impressive second half of the season. Since week 11, Dolphins fans, he's had at least 62 receiving yards or a touchdown in every single game. And that includes 5 touchdowns over the last 6 games. So he has been on an absolute tear. Just set the franchise single season record last week for receiving yards by a tight end in the single season. And that's with 2 games left to go. Also getting out to a slow start to the season. Also when the Dolphins had no passing offense when Tua was out of the lineup. So yeah, let's get another big game here out of Jonnu Smith. Let's get that guy to the Pro Bowl, because I don't think we're going to have too many other guys get their name called in that department here this season. All right, we'll wrap it there, Miami Dolphins fans, but I will be back, like I said, later this week for the final preview and prediction video. So if you do have any questions or anything you'd like me to discuss in that video, go ahead and drop them in the comments. If you haven't done so, get subscribed as well. Would definitely appreciate that. We'll kill it there for today, Miami Dolphins fans. But until next time, fins up.